Hello, my wonderful third graders. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We are still talking about Native Americans, regions, and cultures. This is Lesson 7, Native Americans in the Southeast. What states do you know that are in the Southeast? Have you ever been to the Southeast of North America before? All right, some vocabulary words you will hear throughout the read aloud. Compelled is a verb, motivated or driven to a course of action. I was compelled to complete all of my homework every night so that I would be prepared for class the next day. Densely populated refers to an area that has a large number of people living in a relatively small area. Extended family is family members beyond children and their parents or guardians, including grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, many related generations. Grievances. It's a thing. It's injustices considered as grounds for complaints. Outskirts is a place. It's the outer area of a region, such as a city, the border of an area. Mrs. Thompson preferred to live on the outskirts of town where there were fewer people. I get you, Miss Thompson. All right, so far we've talked about Native Americans in the Central Plains around the Mississippi River. We've talked about a few tribes in the Southwest. Yesterday we talked about some tribes in the Northeast, and today we're going to talk about the Southwest area, which includes Kentucky, or at least most of Kentucky right up here. The Southwest area is what we're talking about today. So remember the names of the tribes that are in each area, because we'll be talking more about that and using the map. Long before the arrival of Europeans, the southeastern part of America was also populated by a large number of native tribes. Just as before, the journey for these people to this region of America had occurred over hundreds and hundreds of years. Extended family groups moved gradually from the northern regions to the southern. They were probably enticed by the warm sunshine that touched their skin, the fruits and berries they could gather, and the herds that they hunted. That sounds like me, except for the herds and why I want to go to Florida for spring break. The warm weather and the juicy fruits you get to eat. And so settlement was a gradual process from a nomadic existence to a structured form of settlement based around small farming communities. Some of these southeastern native tribes included the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Creek. Some of the Creeks, together with other tribes, became merged many years later with a Native American group called the Seminole and migrated farther south into present-day Florida. These native groups lived in densely forested Appalachian Mountains, or on the flat and verdant coastal plains and among the green rolling hills. The area referred to as the Southeast stretches from the lower Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean and from Tennessee to the coastal areas near the Gulf of Mexico. It is an area that even to this day boasts a warm, pleasant climate and rich, fertile soil. Later, these groups joined together, much like the tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy did, and became known as the Five Nations, or Five Civilized Tribes. Just like the Hopi and Zuni of the Southwest and the Iroquois of the Northeast, many of the southeastern tribes had ancestral ties to ancient cultures. For example, the people of the Natchez tribe were the direct descendants of the native peoples who created the extraordinary Mississippian culture. Remember, the Mississippians were some of the first Native American civilizations that we talked about near the Mississippi River. And just as before, once these large extended family groups formed tribes and developed ways to grow and harvest crops, they began to settle in specific areas. It is true to say that farming changed human history forever. Once people began to farm, they were compelled to stay close to the fields in which their crops grew. Therefore, as the crops in the fields grew, so did the cultural identity of large numbers of tribal groups. The landscape and climate contributed greatly to each tribe's identity. For the southeastern Indians, corn, beans, and squash, including pumpkin, were the most important crops. These crops were essential to the survival of southeastern Indians. Sunflowers were grown for seeds and oil, and tobacco was harvested too. All tribes fished and hunted, especially during the winter months. They used bows and arrows to hunt animals such as deer, rabbits, raccoons, and turkeys. The children of the tribes gathered nuts, berries, and sap. Again, several kinds of corn were grown and cooked in a variety of ways. Corn could also be dried and used during the months when food was less plentiful. When Europeans first came to North America, the Southeast was the most densely populated region. It had the most people in a small area. The southeastern Native American tribes benefited from rich soil, reliable rainfall, and warm sunshine for most of the year. So it was a nice place to live, so lots of people lived there. And so, unlike the colder regions of America, in the southeast, it was possible to grow 2 main crops a year. With a more reliable food supply, the native population grew quite considerably. The first crop of the year was usually planted in late spring and harvested in the middle of summer. The second crop was planted midway through the summer. At the end of each growing season, many tribes burned off any unused parts of the plants. This process enriched the soil for the next crop. The men of the tribe were responsible for turning the soil or plowing, and the women and children tended to the crops. Even though the southeastern tribes farmed, it was still important for them to obtain food by hunting, fishing, and gathering. In the wintertime, when frost or snow coated the landscape and nothing could grow in the sleeping earth, hunting parties would leave home and go in search of much-needed food. Southeastern tribes built a combination of small tribal villages near areas that were good for farming and were also close to a water source such as a river or lake. And they built larger town-like settlements with fences in similar locations. The smaller villages were generally close to the larger towns. Several hundred people could live in a tribal town. Each tribe protected its villages and towns as well as its farmland. In the center of the village was a large common area for holding meetings and ceremonies. Children could play in this area too. Children played games and they had toys. Several villages formed chiefdoms. There was a tribal chief who, together with important warriors and religious men, governed the tribe from a central town. The chiefs of these governing bodies held the greatest power of all the leaders and were destined to serve as chiefs from the moment they were born. The chief's house and a gathering place called the Great Hall were also in the center of the village. Like the common areas, it was called the Great House, were also in the center of the village. Like the common area, the Great House was used for special occasions. You ever heard of a kingdom before? Who can tell me, do you know what a kingdom is? Based on what a kingdom is, can you tell me what a chiefdom is? So a kingdom is ruled by a king. A chiefdom is ruled by a chief. As did all native people in North America, the southeastern tribes used natural resources to build their homes. In this case, they generally used wood, cane, mud, and straw to build family homes. The styles of homes did vary, but most southeastern native people built circular homes in the wintertime. Winter homes had cone-shaped roofs through which smoke from an internal fire could escape. Summertime houses varied considerably. Some were round, grass houses, whereas others had large, thatched roofs supported by wooden poles. Some summer houses had walls, others did not. Most southeastern tribes wore similar clothing. Deerskin was scraped and pounded until it became soft to the touch. It was sewn together to make dresses, shirts, leggings, robes, and shoes. One of the largest tribes in the Southeast was the Cherokee. They lived in Georgia, North and South Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Like most tribes, they lived in villages on the edge of a river. Their villages were set up with careful planning, and their homes were cleverly constructed. Cherokee homes were built by weaving river cane, wood, and vines together to make a framework. The framework was then coated with mud like plaster. The roof was either thatched or covered in bark. These homes were permanent homes and took quite some time to construct. The Cherokees are thought to be distant relatives of the Iroquois because of similarities in the language they spoke. They would later become part of the Seminole Nation. In Cherokee society, the men were in charge of hunting, going to war, and making tribal decisions that were political. Cherokee women were responsible for making decisions about the family, property, and farming. River cane is a type of bamboo that grows in the southeastern part of the United States. In the late summer, the Cherokee celebrated the end of the growing season with a kind of harvest festival called the Green Corn Festival. As well as feasting on corn, it was seen as a time to start afresh. New clothes were worn, grievances were settled, so disagreements, and people sang and danced. Like all native peoples, the Cherokee believed in nature spirits. They looked up at the night sky and believed there was a connection between the earth and the heavens. For them, the sun was the most important force of all, and they gave thanks to it and its life-giving energy. The Cherokee often went on hunting, fishing, and trading trips. They traveled along the long, winding rivers in canoes. When journeying across land, they used dogs as pack animals. The Cherokee made beautiful pots, beadwork, bags, and textile art. These items were often traded with other tribes for copper, shells, stone tools, pets, and ochre to make yellow-brown paint. From midsummer through late fall, on the outskirts of most Cherokee villages, a ball game called Anetsa was played. The name of the game is a big clue to how important this ball game actually was. In fact, it was so important that it can hardly be compared to games as we think of them today. The word Anetsa in the Cherokee language means little brother of war. The men who participated in Anetsa would become prepared for fighting wars as they played. Anetsa was played on a flat area of land that could be at least 3 acres in size. 3 acres would be a little more than 2 football fields. Goal posts made of saplings were placed at either end of the play area. The balls used to play this game were made of deer hide and was about the size of a golf ball. Each player had 2 short sticks made of hickory with which to hit the ball. There could be hundreds of players playing at one time. The first team to score 12 points won the game. Special rituals occurred with the guidance of shamans the evening before a game was played, and these rituals were as important as the game itself. Men and women would dance and chant around a fire all night long. One by one, the men would go to the water with the shaman, where they would receive special medicine to make them more confident and skilled. This image is a close-up showing only a few of these hundreds of players in a small area. The rituals were believed to bring success to players, and they were also a way of encouraging the players to be brave, for this game had very few rules and was extremely violent. As a result, there were many injuries. Sometimes people associate or connect the game of lacrosse with the game of Enetza, because the modern lacrosse stick and ball was inspired by the stick and ball used in the game of Enetza. If you had been there and observed the game of Enetza, you would likely see how different Enetza is from lacrosse. Like many other Native American tribes, people of the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole still inhabit areas of the southeastern region of America. Some of these Native Americans identify with modern-day culture, whereas others choose to live as their ancestors lived before them and honor traditions from long ago. You may have previously heard of the Trail of Tears. In 1838, many Cherokee and other Native American groups were forced by the U.S. government to leave their homes in the southeast and move to present-day Oklahoma. Because these people were not prepared for this journey, which took place during the cold winter months, many of them died. It's a really sad part of history. All right, some questions. What things enticed or encouraged extended family groups to migrate from the northeastern to the southeastern parts of the continent of North America? Some of these are the same reason Miss Hill wants to go south for spring break. Warm climate, abundance of fruit and berries, and herds that were hunted. When people began to farm, how did that affect the way they lived? They created settlements so they could remain close to their crops. You heard that the southeastern Native Americans grew crops such as corn, beans, and squash, such as pumpkins, sunflowers, and tobacco. They also fished and hunted, especially during the winter months. What did the children of the tribes do to help acquire food? What was their job? They gathered nuts, berries, and sap. You heard that the southeast was the most densely populated region of the continent when the Europeans arrived. What does densely populated mean? There are many people in a relatively small area of land. Why was this region the most densely populated when the Europeans arrived? There is a rich soil, reliable rainfall, and warm sunshine for most of the year, so it was possible to grow 2 main crops a year. With a more reliable food supply, the native population grew. To adapt to their environment, the Native Americans in the Southeast often lived in different types of homes in the winter than they did in the summer. What did their winter homes usually look like? Usually circular homes with cone-shaped roofs through which smoke from an internal fire could escape. How did the role of men and women differ in the Cherokee culture? Men were in charge of hunting, going to war, and making tribal decisions that were political. Women were responsible for making decisions about the family property and farming. Our word for today is extended family. In the read aloud you heard, extended family groups moved gradually from the northern region to the southern. Say the words extended family. An extended family is made up of many related generations beyond a child and his or her parent or guardians. It includes grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, and nephews. An Iroquois extended family called a clan lived together in a longhouse. How many people do you have in your extended family? Who does your extended family include? Okay, I'm going to say the names in relation to several different people. If the person I say is an example of someone who would be in an extended family, you're going to pick extended family. So my grandmother, Teresa, that would be a member of your extended family. My friend Jacob. He would not be a member of your extended family. My doctor, Dr. Fernandez. That person's not a member of your extended family. My Uncle Michael. He is a member of my extended family. My cousin Maria. She is a member of my extended family. All right. Good job, third graders. I hope you enjoyed learning about the southeastern Native Americans.